There's 1,000 ingredients in our food that are illegal in Europe and other countries. So we're just mass poisoning us, and nobody has chronic disease epidemic like we do in our country. That's why one of the reasons we had the highest death rate from COVID. We had 16% of the COVID deaths in this country. We only have 4.2% of the world's population. And so we did worse than any other country. And the CDC explains that, says it's not our fault. It's because Americans are so sick. CDC said the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases.
Right.
So it wasn't COVID that was killing them. It was chronic disease, right? And we are the sickest. We have the highest chronic disease burden. We have the highest COVID death rate. But it's not just, it's those autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile diabetes, lupus, Crohn's disease, all this IBS, all of these things that suddenly appeared in the mid-'80s. I never knew anybody with any of those diseases when I was a kid.
Yeah, right.
The neurological diseases, ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette's syndrome, narcolepsy, sleep disorders, Tourette's syndrome, ASD, autism. Autism rates in my generation, 70-year-old men, is about between 1 in 1,500 and 1 in 10,000. That's what it is today. My children's generation is 1 in every 34 kids, according to CDC, 1 in every 22 in California. So, and it is devastating our generation. It's our economy. It's going to cause autism alone. So there's a recent paper by Mark Blaxell that shows it'll cost $1 trillion a year by 2030. And then the allergic disease again, which I never saw as a kid. I had 11 siblings, 70 first cousins. I never knew anybody with a peanut allergy. I do 5, but my 7 kids have allergies. It's.
So you're up against some major forces in fighting that particular battle. I mean, first of all, you have to sway public opinion in that direction, and then there's going to be a massive force arrayed against any possible interventions, that's for sure. So tell me what you think you could do, and also tell me why you don't think you would be stopped.
Well, I think they're going to try to stop us, but I've been thinking about this for 40 years, so I know how to do it. And I've worked with Mark Hyman and Kelly Means and Casey Means and a lot of other people to figure out how to do it without having to go to Congress, to do it all with executive orders and policy changes. And, I'll give you one example. I mean, you can get fluoride out of the water by executive order, out of the water systems all over the country. And that is, that's a big issue with public health and cancer, et cetera. But there are other things it would be very hard. You never get congressional approval to ban glyphosate, which is causing all kinds of health problems and cancers all over this country. And so, but here's what you can do. NIH has a budget of $42 billion a year, and it distributes that money to 56,000 scientists who are at research centers, mainly universities in North America, and, Canada, the United States, and some in Europe. And they're supposed to be doing basic science, but what they really do nowadays is they do drug development for the pharmaceutical industry. So NIH is now the primary incubator for new pharmaceutical drugs. And it changed that rule, that changed. NIH used to be the primary scientific agency in the world. It changed in 1980 because we passed a bill called the Bayh-Dole Act that allowed NIH itself and NIH scientists to collect royalties on any pharmaceutical product that they developed. So now that they follow the money, and now what NIH does is they're in a partnership with pharma. They develop new products to treat chronic disease, and anybody who tries to study the etiology, the origins, the causes of chronic disease, that scientist will be blackballed forever. And so what I'm going to do, is change NIH and say we're going to make the primary purpose of this agency to develop science on what's causing chronic disease. So right now, there's very little science that says high fructose corn syrup causes diabetes. That's deliberate. We don't have that science because the agency does not want to see that science. I'm going to make sure that science happens. Not one study, but not just 20 studies, but 100 studies. that show that. Now, what happens when you have 100 studies? There is a rule in the federal courts in this country called the Daubert rule. And that says that if you believe you got sickened by a product, like say you think Coca-Cola made you obese, you can't sue Coca-Cola unless there's at least a critical mass of studies, maybe 20 or 30, that say that that's what it does.
So it's a liability enhancer.
Well, the judge has to make that decision about whether you've passed the Daubert threshold before he allows you to go to a jury. Oh, in a big case like when I was tried the Monsanto case, I was part of the trial team. The big threshold is, can you pass Daubert? And we had about 20 studies that showed that Monsanto, that Roundup caused non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And we had mouse studies, we had rat studies, we had animal studies, bench studies, observational studies, epidemiological studies, so a good range of all different kinds of studies that show that once you get that critical mass, then you can go to a jury. And once that happens, the product is through. So when we sued Roundup, we had 40,000 home gardeners who had gotten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from using Roundup in their backyards. And the way that you try multi-district litigation, you try one of those cases at a time, right, and one after the other in rapid fire, till somebody says, uncle. You either lose them all, and then, you run out of money because it costs a lot of money to try a case, or you win them all, and the maker of that product then has to come to the negotiating table and settle it. We won $289 million in the first trial. We won $89 million in the second. The third trial, we asked for $1 billion, and we got $2.2 billion from the jury. And then Monsanto came to the negotiating table, and we settled the cases for $13 billion, and they agreed to take Roundup, to take glyphosate out of home gardening products. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what you do.
Got it.
Once enough science is out there, you don't have to legislate it against high fructose corn syrup. The lawyers are going to come out of the woodwork.
Okay.
And they're going to be representing 1 million kids with diabetes. And the company is going to say, we're not going to make this product anymore.
All right. Well, you're on a tight timeline. I'm going to continue this discussion on the Daily Wire side. I think I'm going to drill down more into foreign policy and the state of the world with regards to the eternal state of warfare that we seem to have drifted into yet again. I'd like to talk about Israel and Gaza and about Ukraine and Russia. There's other issues as well. So if you're inclined to join us on the Daily Wire side, that's what's going to happen. And so I guess the other thing I'd just like to mention is we're going to see each other again in about 2 weeks in D.C., I believe, at the Rescue the Republic.
The Rescue the Republic.
Yeah, that's been put together by Brett Weinstein. And
everybody should come to that. That's going to be one of the... If you care about the slide of America into censorship, surveillance, and totalitarianism, you want to be at this event because this is going to be like the March on the Pentagon back in the 60s. It's going to be the biggest march ever, the biggest event ever, protesting this really ugly
dissent
apocalypse for democracy.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, all right, sir. Thank you very much. Hopefully the powers that be at YouTube will let this interview stand because they took the last one down, which I wasn't very happy about. So I hope we didn't Oh, definitely. I hope we didn't transgress against any of the invisible rules, but we tried to. So thank you very much for coming to see me. It's much appreciated. And good luck with your continued negotiations with Trump. That's quite the twisting turn of affairs. And it's going to be quite something to see how this all plays out in the next 50 days. That's for sure. So everybody who's watching and listening, thank you very much for your time and attention. And give some consideration to coming to Washington, D.C. on September 29th for this Rescue the Republic event. It should be quite the thing, quite the celebration. That's how Weinstein characterized it. There's music there, as well as speeches from people whose ideas you actually might want to hear. So that's a once-in-a-generation event. So, make your way there. Thanks again, sir.
Thank you.